Okay, I'm getting started here right here shortly. We're still waiting on Danny, but as soon as he come in, I'll put him on the screen. Okay. So we are
Okay.
live on Facebook, and if Brittany, Ashley, if you all can unmute yourselves, uh, Collins, come
I
back.
kept pressing the button back to mute it. You probably like, if you don't stop pressing that button, mute yourself back.
Look, check this out. If you mute yourself, I'm gonna have to unmute you, and I'm not saying I'm gonna be the best at that. So I need you to
Right. Like mute yourself.
be selective about muting. Okay.
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 Background, I would stay unmuted.
Okay.
All right.
I got
So So I'm going to go ahead and introduce. So I want to welcome everyone to the discussion. We're on episode 21. First, I want to shout out to my co-host, JeRod Lindsay. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, my brother. How are you?
Good, good. So I apologize, everyone. I'm actually in Charlotte Douglas Airport right now. As soon as I finish here, I'll be headed back to my room. But um, I can't miss the opportunity to do the discussion. So it's very important to me. But I'm going to let these distinguished folks on the line introduce themselves. So I'm gonna start with Brittany, and then you can pass the baton, Brittany.
Okay, I'll pass it the time. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today on the discussion. My name is Brittany Collins. I am owner of Developing Me. I'm a mental health counselor and consultant. Also, mental health counselor to the University of Cincinnati student athletes through sports medicine. So, thank you for having me here today. I'm gonna pass the torch or the baton. I'm gonna say I like the torch because Delta Sigma Theta sorority incorporated in the house. But we're gonna go to Carlton.
Um, so no relation. I guess I got to say that first.
Right? But we are though, in some way, shape, or form. I mean,
Right. But she definitely become like sister friend.
yeah.
But I'm Carlton Collins. I am, educator, but I currently, owner of a couple of businesses. One being Educate the World. It's an educational consultancy that I've had coming up on 10 years. And then I also have a business, Engines That Work, which is centered on minority business development. Uh, and and then also I am, one of, part of the executive leadership of the Heights movement, which we do a lot of work centered around Lincoln Heights, as well as, advocacy against the Cincinnati Police Department gun range, and just a lot of other community work dealing with the kids and economic development and a whole bunch of other stuff. But I'm just happy to be here, and just grateful for the opportunity to talk to these two distinguished gentlemen. And I'll pass it to Ashley.
All right. Thank you, Carlton. Hi, everybody. I'm Ashley Glass. I am the founder, owner of Black Women Cultivating Change. So I started this business last year, and our main focus is to educate on the social determinants of health, specifically in the African American community. I have very lovely co-hosts slash co-speakers. We've met in the community doing community work, and very thankful that I've got to meet up with all of you, and very thankful to be on the discussion today.
Great. We are great to have all three of you, and hopefully we can get someone else in. Who's joining us later? Who's supposed to?
Okay, Danny said it won't add him, so I don't know if he's trying to log on and he needs to be added.
Okay. Mo always takes care of the behind the scenes stuff, so hopefully we can get Danny on a little bit later, right? Ashley, I'm actually going to come back to you, and I'll probably promote this a couple of times throughout this discussion, but I know on February 22nd, all four of you, right, Brittany, Carlton, Ashley, and Danny, will be holding a discussion via Google Meet, right, on what is mental health mean to me, right? And that's being sponsored by your organization, correct? Your business, right?
Correct. So this is actually the first project of my first official project from this business. So we're really excited, and I've got some good people that are working with me, and we're excited to present to the kids.
Right. So what inspired this? What made you put this project together?
This specifically, so working with Carlton and in Lincoln Heights, when he told me about that situation, I immediately was like, wait, what about the mental health of these residents? Because, you know, a lot of times that gets missed. So just working with that, and then I start thinking about the pandemic and the kids and how, you know, their mental health has probably been affected from this. I know as adults, our mental health has been affected, but a lot of times the kids get missed. So I wanted to make sure we could go in and kind of talk to the kids about their emotions, their feelings, and that sort of thing, how we navigate through our emotions, what's healthy, and things like that. So I just thought it would be good for the kids here in Cincinnati.
And that will be held on February 22nd via Google Meets. And you can go to any one of you all's Facebook page and see the flyer and information for that, right?
Correct.
You said when Carlton told you about that situation. So I'm gonna actually go to Carlton. So Carlton, can you tell us a little bit, for those who may not know, about the situation that Ashley is referring to?
Yeah, so in Lincoln Heights, you know, for the last 74 years, and Lincoln Heights this year is 75 years old. So since 1947, Cincinnati Police Department has had a gun range that it physically resides in Evendale, but the only community that the two communities it's up against in terms of residents or residential communities is Woodlawn, which is about 50 yards to the west. You have houses there, and then about 75 yards to the south, you have apartment complexes, which is part of Lincoln Heights. So, you know, the nearest playground is within 100 yards, and there's actually two of them. And there's a basketball court as well. So, you know, when you grow up in Lincoln Heights, as I did, you grow up hearing these gunshots. It is an open air gun range. They shoot, you know, in calendar year of 2019, there was 35,000 gun training hours that take place there. So it's Cincinnati Police Department, as well as FBI, DEA, ATF, U.S. Marshals, SWAT, and they also do sniper training there. And Evendale Police uses the range as well. They also do canine training on this parcel of land. But, you know, the major thing is, you know, we hear these gunshots and they echo over the entire community. And really our efforts in terms of lobbying really was centered around how do we make sure that this next generation doesn't have to deal with a lot of these same issues. Because there's never really been any kind of accounting of the damage or impact. There's been no study in terms of how has it impacted residents. You know, has there been any mental damage, you know, behavioral damage, as well as, you know, when you talk about, this is really where, you know, Ashley came in and she was educating, you know, us in terms of like the social determinants of health and how stress levels can then impact you, you know, physically, and it impacts, you know, your predisposition to, you know, eat, to, you know, and eat what you can, right? We're a food desert as well. So, you know, eat what you can to kind of like cope with stress, right? Stress eating is a real thing. It's actually a medical term, right? So then when you think about that, you think about high blood pressure and cholesterol and diabetes and all these other things that become a part of kind of the experience, your health experience when you're dealing with high levels of stress. And that's kind of just, it's kind of just caked, built into the tapestry of, and I always say, you know, gunshots are the soundtrack to our life if you grew up in Lincoln Heights.
So, hey, I appreciate you giving us that feedback, right? So, and all of this led to Ashley, it kind of snowballed into the event that you all will be having, and hopefully there'll be more like it, right? Brittany, how did you come into the fold?
Absolutely.
Can we, okay.
Yep, sorry about that. So I came in, I'm a doctoral candidate as well at the University of Cincinnati, and I'm doing research on Black student athlete mental health. And so my area of expertise is within the athletic arena too, and the athletic culture. And just that multiple identities when it comes to just mental health. Black student athletes. I'm a former coach as well and working in high school sectors, athletic departments. So just off my research and connecting and having these conversations, it was just so important to be a part of this within the high schools as well. And then through my private practice, working with the adolescents, young adults on mental health and increasing awareness to have those conversations, especially with coaches and student athletes, because there's that kind of, I'll say, double stigma when it comes to, as a former collegiate athlete myself, just you don't talk about it. It's like, we're good, I'm all right, or then I'm just going to go into sports as a way of coping. But then, as we see now, also with COVID-19, racial and social injustices, a lot of that is being taken away right now, where they can't even play, and so it's really having even more impact on mental health. And now we're talking about it more, which we should have been talking about it, but now it's, at the front line to talk about it even more so now. But it's been going on, racial, social injustices, and mental health. So I say that to say that's how I came about into the equation of having that conversation.
What are some of the mental concerns, right, that you are seeing in sports? Because I know sports, right? I think the NFL is 70% Black, NBA majority Black as well. So a lot of our professional sports that we follow are Black. So what are some of the concerns that you've noticed in the mental health arena?
Oh, there's so much to that. So I'll just say finding a voice. We see with even Colin Kaepernick when he made a decision to, and so many more have taken a knee before that. We talk about back to John Carlos and the Olympics, just throughout history, but finding their voice, honestly, and advocating for themselves. So if we think about the multiple identities of having a privilege, I'll say, so to speak, to be an athlete, but at the same time still being an oppressed, marginalized population. So that's tough, battling that to say, like, all right, I'm gonna use my athletic platform to speak against racial and social injustices, but at the same time, now I get blackballed, so to speak, hashtag blackballed, as we saw Jamil Hill, bring up blackballed. And we see that throughout. So you see identity, race-based stress. And then we have racial identity stress, like it's trauma, it's traumatic, as we see a lot of it mirrors traumatic, like fight, flight, freeze, or submit. And so it's that numbness, and then just opening up and having that representation too. So one of the reasons I entered into sports medicine is because that need for representation. You don't see a lot, honestly, in the medical field, mental health field. It's a lot predominantly white males that you see, and especially in positions of leadership, you don't even see that professionally. So I entered into this field and pursued my doctorate so that there can be more representation to speak to, I'll just say, not just Black student athletes, but BIPOC populations, Black, Indigenous, people of color, so that you can work on those multiple identities throughout.
I have one follow-up question, and then we're going to get to Mr. Fresh so he can introduce himself as well. You mentioned flight, fight, freeze, or submit, right? For those who don't know, can you kind of give us some details about what that means?
Sure. So, and we'll talk about that too in our presentation, toxic stress overall, so that adolescents can understand what that is too. But it's PTSD. And a lot of times you hear about it, military, mostly those that go to war. But that racial identity and that toxic stress, even as Carlton explained, hearing the gunshots, all of that is traumatic in war. So you go through fight, flight, freeze, or submit. Your body responds, and so some people can be numb to it, desensitized to it. It's all trauma. So that's what it is. It's PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or toxic stress.
Can you train yourself to do one? So if you want to be someone who fights, can you train yourself to fight mentally, or can you train yourself to flight, to freeze? Is that something that you can train your mind to do?
So Carlton shaking his head. I'm gonna say, if you get in front of someone or the right amount of support, we've talked about that, making sure that you have someone pouring into you support, whether it be a coach, and that's usually what it starts with. I was a coach first, and I was a collegiate athlete, or a mental health provider. You can work through that, but honestly, it's a survival response. You go into survival mode, and so until you're taught how to get out of survival mode, you necessarily can't. You're just in that until you realize or have that awareness and that knowledge and the tools to say you're in survival mode. You don't have to be in that anymore or all the time. You're not in danger and you don't have to be in fear. you're naturally going to be fighting all the time, or flighting, running away from it, or numb, or submitting to it. Carlton was going to.
No, and I mean, I was just gonna say, like, you know, and this is just real, and anybody who grew up, and especially is in our generation, um, you know, Lincoln Heights guys have a reputation of always wanting to fight. But you know, part of that is the fact that we really don't have a flight response, right? We're always wired to be ready to fight because like that's what we're conditioned to, right? And I know most people don't even think of it like that, but you know, the reason why so many of us were so short, and you think about so many people that I grew up with, you know, they always had that quick temper, and it was like really, really quick to light that, you know, to light that fuse and before they explode, right? Like that was in reference to like the way we grew up, right? We didn't know it then, but that's really the biggest thing about it is like we were wired to always be violent because we lived in violence and understood stress and stressors. So when those things and those situations arose, it really just became a natural instinct to attack, right? Because we haven't been wired for anything else.
I like that response, man. And go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to share, even when I was working in Lincoln Heights, we were outside of the healthcare center there. And there was a young man, he was like, probably, I don't know how old he was, maybe 15, 14, around that age. And I asked him, I'm like, so how do you feel hearing gunshots all the time? Like, and he's like, you know, I mean, that's just everyday life for me. Like, I don't know anything different. And like, yeah, and that like totally like hit me hard. I'm like, okay, like you should, like hearing gunshots constantly all day should not be normal. But like when you're hearing that and internalizing that all day, every day, it's just, to me, just crazy how, you know, they have to, you know, that's just normal life to them.
Or even nightmares too, like having nightmares and not realizing, like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I have nightmares every day, like, and talk about it like it's,
just like
no, you should be able to sleep peacefully. Like, having nightmares every day,
yeah,
you don't know, like that's trauma, right? Like that's traumatic, and then it's like, oh, that's not the way I should be living. Like,
man, Dany, I'm gonna pause you too, because we're coming right back to that. I just want to give Dany some space to introduce himself. But we're gonna come right back to the trauma and the numbness of that, because I have a specific question that I want you to ask you, Ashley and Brittany. Mr. Danny Fresh, how you doing today, sir? You don't want us to see him all of a sudden.
He's like, I mean, that's how I'm doing. I'm doing.
All right, you know what? We're gonna come back to you, Dany. So Ashley, you were speaking to the numbness of, you know, hearing gunshots every day. That's not okay, right? Once you become numb to something though, do you feel like it still impacts you mentally?
Oh yeah.
Can you tell us how?
So I will let Brittany actually explain that because she's the expert, but I will say, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this business, because so many people are experiencing so many things like in their environment that they don't even understand how much it impacts them on a day-to-day basis. So it does internalize, like, and then just on a health perspective, I'll let Brittany go in the mental health, but even on the health perspective, like it can weaken your immune system, and it can cause like chronic disease too, not just the mental health aspect. So it's a whole spiral of effects when you are constantly internalizing all of this from your environment, for sure.
Oh yeah.
I appreciate that. Brittany, what would you like to add?
So I'll just say like that frontal lobe is constantly going off. Some fear is good, but when you're in this constant state of fear all of the time, that's not healthy. Like your stress response and your cortisol levels are going up and increasing every day. So if that's every day on a constant, you can't rest. Like stress is a silent killer. We talk about that over and over again, right? That's what's happening to your body. You're not able to relax. You're constantly in defense mode. You're constantly in fight mode. And so not being able to let that down and say, I'm safe, literally, I'm safe, I'm okay, that's bad. That's not healthy. And so until you can be in an environment or have a place where you're trusting and able to say, I don't have to be on defense. I don't have to be in fight mode. My, that amygdala and that frontal lobe doesn't have to constantly be going. Yes.
Break down.
Let me jump in there real quick, JeRod. So
Go ahead.
I watch All American. Who on here watches All American?
Yes, all of that.
Okay. So the latest episodes, he Spencer been having an issue with his arm, his shoulder.
Yes.
He got shot in. And the therapist said, "What is your stuck point?" And he didn't know. He didn't know until he figured it out. And figured out, you know what? It's cool. It's cool because
Great example.
all my time trying to protect her. And what's happening is his from a physical perspective, his shoulder is fine. But when the game starts and he starts to worry about stuff, stress starts to hit, his shoulder goes numb.
Yes.
And the therapist will help him figure out what his stuck point is, which is cool. So that was very enlightening to me to be like, wow, there's so many times in our life that we have stuck points, right? And we don't, and it can affect us physically, right? There's nothing really wrong with his shoulder, but physically it's causing his shoulder to go numb. So I really like how All America has weaved in the mental health thing and tied it into the story. It was really, really powerful for me.
Dang, that's a huge visual. And there's a book called The Body Keeps Score, and that's your body keeps score, like literally with trauma. Your body, and athletes feel it like, man, I'm injured, like just like you explained, like you feel it, your body, you're like, there's no problems. The doctors are like, physically, there's no problems. You're okay. It's mental. Like literally, if there's trauma and your body is constantly in stress, your body keeps score and remembers that.
I want to real quick, I just want to give a question or add a question, ask a question or make a comment that has been put in our comments. Our community trauma, and this is from Rhonda Lynn Campbell, our community trauma has always been ignored. How do we get our community to seek help because of the stigma behind mental health? I'm gonna repeat that question real quick. Dany, are you with us?
Dany, say something.
I don't think he can hear.
I don't know if he can hear her.
Let me see. Oh, he put I can't
He said he can't hear anything on his end.
Oh, okay.
Ashley, can you text him maybe?
Okay, so
Yeah, I'm gonna text him.
Okay.
Can he talk? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think that's the issue with his device, maybe.
When you text him, Ashley, if he can speak, tell him hold up the church finger when he ready to speak, and I'll point to him.
Okay.
But in the meantime, again, Brittany, it looked like you were ready to jump on this. Our community trauma has always been ignored. How do we get our community to seek help because of the stigma, behind mental health?
And I'll start and then pass to Carlton because I know he was ready too. But I think what we're doing now is having the conversation, this representation, and talking about it, and understanding that you're not alone. Like as a community, a lot of people are affected by it and going through it, and it's more common than people talk about and think. So it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to understand that you've experienced trauma. And unfortunately, it is more normal, especially throughout the communities. And so we have to have the discussion and keep having these conversations to say it's okay to seek out help, but also know that there is representation out there, and there are Black therapists and those that are culturally competent, culturally proficient, culturally sensitive that you can go to and you can trust to talk to. Because even when we think about Tuskegee experiment throughout the medical field, and the APA just put out an apology due to its racist practices, finally, that just put an apology out. So it's huge. We have to have this conversation, acknowledge that that's what's been going on for so long, but it's okay to talk now. Like more people are aware, you are safe, you can trust. So we have to keep having these conversations. And I'll pass it
before you pass it to Carlton, before we go to Carlton, can you just let us know what the APA is? And then Carlton, if you don't mind just chiming in and giving your expertise as well.
And I'm going to put it in the chat.
Okay, cool. That's perfect. All right, Carlton, what are your thoughts on this? Why aren't people seeking mental health?
So it's twofold. One, I think, when we were first crafting this conversation about mental health and talking about Lincoln Heights and that whole piece, one of the things that I realized that we could capitalize on that went counter to the narrative around mental health was the fact that we have a culprit, right? We can assign the blame to somebody, right? And the main thing about mental health when you talk about our communities, you know, is the fact that if there's issues around mental health, we think that's an affront to our parenting, right?
There it is.
Our parents, Danny in here, bro, go ahead.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
said,
Hey, man,
There
you've
it is.
been fighting for it, bro.
You must have had
Sorry,
an
I'm
iPhone.
late.
he is so happy. Like,
Hey, I've been reading lips.
Hey, thank you for joining us, Danny. Carlton, why don't you finish your thought, and then we're gonna let Danny introduce himself. And I got a question for you specifically, Danny, and I think it ties into what we're talking about now.
Okay. And then so yeah, it's this idea that, you know, because you have mental health challenges, it makes you a bad parent, right? And we also there's a realization that our generation, us right here, we're the first people to acknowledge that mental health may require a professional, and it's not just something that should be dealt with the pastor, or something that you just keep inside of your own family. You know, we're the first generation to say, hey, it's okay. Self-care is important. You know, if you don't feel okay, it's okay not to feel okay. Like, you know, reach out when you need something, or whatever the case may be, right? So I think, to the point of, like, you know, when we talk about these solutions, it really falls on our generation to really set the standard, right? Really create a new narrative. And as we become more and more of the population, right? With, you know, there's very little of minuscule numbers of the greatest generation, and, you know, baby boomers are on their way out. You know, that's just reality. So at the end of the day, we get to create a new normal, right?
Mhm.
And that new normal can have mental health at the forefront of part of, like, self-care and development, and how do we personally, you know, navigate life. And just like we need to take care of our bodies and be conscious of what we eat, we also have to be conscious of our mental health, and make sure that our kids are always aware and conscious of their own mental health, and how things can impact them.
I like that. I like that. Danny, introduce yourself for us, and actually, and as soon as you're done introducing yourself, can you kind of tell us, because I always look at barbers as like part-time therapists, right? If you develop
Right.
a good relationship with your barber, you kind of talking to your barber about different stuff. It might start with sports, but then it kind of develops, right? So why don't you give us your background, what you do, and then tell us a little bit about some of the conversations you may have in the chair.
What's happening, y'all? My name is Danny Fresh, the barber, Cincinnati's #1 barber. You know what I'm talking about? Right now, we're talking about mental health. I cut a lot of hair. You know, I deal with a lot of people, you know, from kids to adults, you know, older people. And you're right, you know, a lot of those conversations do start with small talk, sports or whatnot. But a lot of times, you know, people don't have anyone to talk to about their problems. You know, a lot of time people carry burdens, you know, carry a lot of things, and they keep it to themselves. So I do, you know, hear a lot about people's struggles, you know, mentally, you know, financially, all that.
So when you hear these, how do you how do you respond to them?
Me, you know, I try to preach mental strength. You know, I try to let people know that we control our own thoughts. You know what I'm saying? Our thoughts become things. You know, you can wake up tomorrow and, you know, be in a bad mood, but, you know, it's your choice to stay in that bad mood. You know, you can mentally make that choice to either have a good day or a bad day. It's really all on you. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I see you agreeing. So Carlton, Ashley, Brittany, you all agree with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to control your thought life, and just how you start your day and what you feed yourself with.
Right.
You know, that's always something, like, you know, with my wife, she deals with anxiety sometimes, and I'm like, nah, but what do you put back into your spirit? You know what I mean?
Right.
with the things that you feed yourself eventually gonna manifest in your life.
Mhm.
So it's really important to, and I think Dany hit the nail on the head. It's like, you know, you got to control your thought life, and more importantly, you got to protect your thought life.
Oh,
Sure.
I really like that. I really like that.
I just wanted to say, sorry, real quick. As African Americans, we're constantly getting, I guess you could say, stress from work, from just being Black in America, just all of that every day. So if you don't center yourself and start yourself positive before you go out into that,
Right.
it's like a domino effect after that. So if you start in the morning, like I start in the morning, as soon as I wake up, first thing I say is thank you for another day on earth. You know what I'm saying? Thank you for the ability to even be alive. But just having that positive mindset is so important because we experience so much. It definitely, we got to build ourselves up before we go out into that.
I think these days, you know, you really have to be your own cheerleader. You feel me? Like every day I wake up happy. You know,
I said yes. Make your own locker sign. Y'all don't remember?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. No.
I'm with you, Brittany. We with you.
Okay, my fault. I'm
ahead,
up in the background and cutting you off at the same time. My fault.
It's all good. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I definitely agree with that. You know, I'm definitely, you know what I'm saying, my biggest cheerleader. You know, every day I motivate myself to go harder. You know, I encourage myself to think positive thoughts. You know, I encourage some of my clients, you know, to get through, you know, tough times. I tell them to read a book. You know, read something that can strengthen your mind. You know, put some things in those voids. You feel me?
When you say in those voids, I like that, right? What is in those voids? Talk to me about those voids. What do you mean when you tell someone put something in those voids?
You know, I know you've heard, what would they say? The idle mind is the devil's playground.
Yes, sir.
You know what I'm talking about? So I encourage, you know, people to write down goals, you know, set goals, you know, achieve them. You know, when you set goals, you block everything else, I think. You know?
I appreciate that. For sure. I want to Ashley, I actually want to come back to you about something, right? So we talk about mental health, we talk about seeking professional help and it being okay, right? Carlton and Brittany kind of touched on that. I wanted to ask you, what do you say to people who say a therapist, they can't help me, they don't know me, but like how they gonna help me better than my own family? They doing this, they saying these things to everybody, right? I've had people say that to me, right, when I've recommended therapy. And I wasn't a fan of therapy, right? At one point, right? I had to be coerced into it, so to speak.
Yeah.
But you originally think these people don't know me, they're just doing it for a check. What is your response to that?
Well, first and foremost, I always say therapy has saved my life. It truly has. You know, we all get apprehensive about speaking to people about, you know, what we have going on inside of our head. We think we're the only ones having these thoughts, going through these struggles, that sort of thing. But I always say, you know, this is a chance to talk to someone who's totally neutral. Like they're not there to impose anything on you. This is really a session for you to kind of air out all your frustrations and anger or whatever you need to talk about. And it doesn't even have to be bad stuff. You can even talk to your therapist about good stuff that's going on. It's just always good to have someone to communicate with. So that's like my main thing is just, I know therapy gets a bad rap and there's a stigma behind therapy, but it doesn't even have to be for negative things. You know, and that's what I try to just instill in people is therapy is just healthy. It's just like going and seeing your doctor if you're, you know, you're going to get a checkup every year or you just need, you know, it's literally the same exact thing. Just now your focus is on your brain and your mental health, but it's the same.
You mentioned earlier, I believe, the 4 social determinants of health, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what are those and why are
social
they
determinants? Okay, so with the social determinants of health, you have education, so how that affects your life. You have your built environment, your neighborhood. So what goes into that is like housing, violence, if you have gun violence in your neighborhood, just the social networks in your neighborhood, that sort of thing. You have healthcare. So with healthcare, there sometimes could be a lack of healthcare, could be a lack of access, could be insurance issues, could be just, there is racism in healthcare. So you just could be treated differently and not even know that you're being treated differently. So advocating for that. We also have, I'm so sorry, I'm blanking, but like social justice, criminal justice, that sort of thing, the criminal justice system. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with like the prison to pipeline conversation, and how they literally can predict the prison population by looking at the 3rd grade reading test. So, and how important early childhood education is and that sort of thing. And I feel like I'm missing something else. Maurice, you might be able to help me with this, but I think that's pretty much it. So it's really just looking at all those things we really don't typically understand that impacts our health. Like everything literally impacts your health. So we talk about food insecurity. So sometimes we live in neighborhoods that we don't have access to healthy food. We wonder why obesity is high and there's chronic diseases in these neighborhoods. Well, there's no grocery store. So these people are going to corner stores and hoping that there's some sort of, healthy options when they go to the corner store, but it's just so entangled. There's transportation. So not everybody has a car. So how are they getting to work? What is the bus schedule like? So it's all those things, those systemic things that interact ultimately with your health. I'm going to throw a tough one out there, and I'm gonna just put this on the floor because I don't feel like this is necessarily an easy question to answer, right? Everyone on our panel, right, all agrees, and I agree as well, that you have to control your thoughts. You have to put positivity into your thoughts. You have to tell yourself you're gonna have a great day. You have to set yourself off the right way. What about those who, we have COVID-19, right? We have this pandemic, right? What about those who are in poor communities? They're experiencing this COVID-19 and they are impacted in ways that they never would have imagined. How would you tell them to move forward and maintain positivity in the face of all of this adversity that they're facing? And also, can you all follow up with the mental impact that COVID-19 has and will have on people?
I mean, I would say, the circumstances don't dictate how you take time and space for yourself, right?
I like that.
I think it's really, really important for everybody you have to carve out that space for yourself. You cut the TV off, the kids is in bed or whatever, where you just sit and you meditate and whether that's even you put your favorite, throw that Maxwell on and have a glass of wine and you just to yourself, right? Where you just have a moment of peace and in your thoughts. Like if you did that every single day, you'll start seeing the benefits in a week, right? Of just taking that time and just finding and carving out your own peace, right? Because a lot of us start a day and then go through the day, never experiencing peace in the process, right? We just go from one thing to the next thing. We're on social media, so our brains are firing, you know what I mean? Having all these interactions, seeing stuff, and God forbid if you actually still watch world star hip hop fights and all that other kind of violence, right? But again, that's part of that. How do you protect yourself, and protect the things that you come in contact with, remove some of these, lack of a better term, toxic ass people. If they not there to help you build, help you grow, help you continue to move forward in life, like, the world was hard pre-COVID. So like post-COVID, a leech costs so much more. You know what I mean? They take so much more out of you, right? Because there's not as much that's deposited into each one of us. Because we had those distractions because we're moving around and all that. You know what I mean? We were active in that, and in those times, that was sometimes our way to self-medicate, was being active and continually in stuff. So I think the bigger thing now is like you just got to carve out that time, that space, just for yourself, If that means you got to wake up 30 minutes before the kids and just sit there, just you know what I mean? You got to find that, vehicle. And I think it's even more important now, the fact that we're in COVID, that you just got to be intentional about that self-care.
Appreciate that. Self-care, self-care. Does anyone else have anything that they want to add to that?
I was going to say, especially with self-care, self-awareness, you have to get to know yourself and take that time to get to know yourself and focus on what you can control versus what you cannot. So many times anxiety is what if, and we're creating this movie that may never even play out. And you have to flip the coin. Like there's other sides that you need to look at. There's another perspective that you got to flip. And that's the renewing the mind daily. And I feel like we all touched on that, but there's a reason why every faith-based religion says in a different way to renew your mind, literally. And there's got to be something to that. Like I pick up on, like, if there's a common theme and somebody's saying the same thing over, be in the present moment, renew your mind daily, guard your heart and mind. I'm like, oh, and so many people say that. So many, like, so you have to tap into that. Get to know everybody's journey is different. So don't compare yourself. And don't compare your self-care journey. So we're all different. We all have different backgrounds and just different perspectives that we bring. And we all have different journeys and self-care journeys and ways that we need deposits, right? So you have to, that self-awareness is so important, and finding what deposits work for you.
I really like how you all are providing, right, actionable steps. Carlton, wake up early if you got to, 30 minutes earlier, or whenever when the house is quiet, find your time, right, your self-care. Brittany, what you were just saying in regards to self-awareness, renewing your mind daily, right? Why could you give us an example of what renewing your mind daily looks like?
So I'm gonna go back to even what Ashley said, even with gratitude. Yes, breathing. Yeah. Remember, present moment
Yes.
of breathing, grounding
Yes.
techniques. As every day you wake up is a new day. That's how you have to look at it. Like every day is a new day. What is my purpose for today? Not like this overall big, heavy world, and like literally just focus on today. What do I have today? And at the end of that day, what can I be grateful for and thankful for, regardless of what happened? COVID-19 is going on in Texas. There's power that's going out. People don't have, and literally every day I'm like, thank God that I still have power to even be able to talk on this platform right now, today, to even be able to be connected to these people today. There was a time that I didn't even want to talk and go to therapy, and I became a therapist. You see what I'm saying? So like you literally have to think about every journey, every difficulty, and do that positive reframing to say like, there's something I can be thankful for. And at the end of the day, I'm going to be intentional and mindful to know that there's something I can just pause and breathe and reflect upon to say, I got through the day at the end of the day, and tomorrow's a new day to reset and try again. Even if I messed up, or even if something bad came, like I literally get the chance to just say, I'm gonna take a deep breath. I did everything that I could, and tomorrow I'm gonna wake up and try again and then renew myself, refresh state, whether that's through prayer, whether it's through music, whether it's through checking in with your kids and saying good morning, just something that you are finding a routine for yourself, and it's different for everybody.
I like that. I like that. And I also like how you brought us back to what Ashley said, right? Ashley wakes up, and just thank you for letting me see another day. One of the most basic things, right? Thank you for allowing me to say thank you, right? Ashley, I feel like I seen your face perk up when I mentioned, right, the impact that COVID-19 may have on people. Would you like to touch upon that?
So I thought that the COVID impact was hard for everyone, but, and we were just talking about this in one of my courses, but we also had the whole George Floyd incident happen last year too. So I felt like for us, it was like a double whammy, and people didn't understand why we were so like, how it affected us so hard. But so we had to deal with police brutality and the pandemic, one right after the other, which we've been dealing with police brutality, you know, for years, but this one like really kind of got everybody's attention.
Yeah, it broke us.
Yeah, it broke us for sure. So it was like one thing after another, and then it's like you said, dealing with, you know, our population we deal with the other stressors such as chronic diseases and lower income. And now who's going to watch my kids? I still have to pay the bills. We are going through a pandemic, but and then it was just a lot of like a spiral out of control. So I just to piggyback off of what everybody else said, I think you either took this prior year as a time to really do a self-reflection and really be able to sit with yourself and be able to see what those, I don't want to say issues, but just be able to internally look at yourself and see how you could see the light in anything. So being at home with no one else, no interaction with, you can't just lean on your friend. If you might have been used to seeing your friend every week and that was your like glimpse of hope, or going into work, but you couldn't do that. You had to like sit with yourself and the people that you lived with and actually be able to make light out of that situation. So I took it kind of as a blessing too, like we got to really sit down and stop and pause and reflect on our life, what's important in our life. Because I think everybody has a different view on what's important in life too now, after the pandemic too. So I just want to say that. And I do think we'll be dealing with the effects of this though for years and years to come. So this was a huge toll, and I don't even think we've seen the surface of, the snowball effect this has on everybody's mental health from this event.
And
I appreciate that. You inspired a response. Charmaine Rice says, yes, Ashley, layers upon layers of trauma and repeated reminders of the double standards that exist around policing, healthcare, access to resources, living. Excellent discussion. Thank you all so much for sharing simple yet powerful dialogue and much, much needed conversation. Thank you for making this time on a Friday evening. I didn't know I didn't read the whole thing. Look forward to on a Friday evening. Looking forward to tuning into the rest of the dialogue on the recording later. Stay well. I wasn't ready to end just yet. I do want to come to Dany. I want to give Dany an opportunity to speak on this topic. Then I want to remind everyone on February 22nd, via Google Meets, the flyer will be posted on Carlton Collins, Ashley Glass, Dany Fresh, Brittany Collins page for more details. I believe it's first session is at 8, another one is at 1. What does mental health mean to you, right? You all are going into the neighborhood schools, so I really appreciate that. Dany, I really want you to touch on as well, right? If someone feels like it's bleak, COVID's impacting me, I can't think of a situation, what would you tell a person who feels like it's hard to have an impact on their thoughts at this moment?
Man, stop overloading yourself with the news. Stop being so receptive to negative energy. By seeing COVID had people at home watching the news, and the news will brainwash you into being mentally sick.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
Television.
You got it.
Hello, somebody.
Now, I just feel like you can't let the news and all that bombard you. You have to be able to put up mental guards against all that. You can't, taking so much of that in, would drive you crazy. The COVID, stay home, the police brutality. I don't know. It's just crazy, when you allow all that to enter your mind at one time. We have to be able to put up guards. So that's why I think mental strength should be preached about also. That's key, mental strength.
I appreciate that. I
guess it's a shameless plug. So I had a homie send this to me, and it's called Breathe. It's a guided healing journey for Black men. And he sent this to like everybody in the circle, you know what I mean? And it just became this thing where it's like now we're kind of doing it together, and they guide you through it, and then there's parts of it where you're just journaling, right? It's kind of like 60 days where you go through this process. And specifically to the men, you know what I mean? And that's the lens that I come from, you know what I mean? I was raised by a single father, it's just me, my dad, my brother. I had a son, he had twin boys. I got my baby girl now, but then, and I went to Morehouse. So it's like Black men is like what I know. And I would also just say, one, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. If you need to cry, just cry. It's cool. If you need to get it out, that's cool. Have men in your circle who can support you, speak life into you, like come to you with, you can come to them with anything and be in that place of vulnerability. And don't feel like where you have to be judged, right? And I think about Dany, like, everybody vulnerable, at least in some way, shape, or form with a barber, right? You sit back in the chair, like you know what I mean? You in a vulnerable position already. So it's kind of easy, it's kind of built into the process, right? But you got to have that circle of people, you know what I mean? Particularly other men who you can meet with on that level, so that you can
Relief.
that space for yourself, man. It's so important. And I'm just particularly directing that at men because we really don't do that in the way that we should. And it feels like we always have to put on this, this facade of like only demonstrating strength, right? But there's strength in being able to show your weaknesses. And that's just a big part of just my maturation, right? It's just learning that and then getting men like that that's in my circle who I can come to with anything.
You show the book again, Carlton. We had a question in the chat for the.
Oh, what's the title of the book? It's
can you put it in the chat, Carlton, as well?
Breathe.
Carlton, you gotta put it in the chat.
I will.
Guided journal.
And oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, Ashley and Brittany, do you have any final thoughts and comments as well?
We already was like, and so
yeah, we was like,
because we do the same thing, just in a different capacity, honestly. But we do feel like we have to be strong for everybody all the time, and that's why I was gonna pass the torch to Ashley to say that's why she started like Black Women Cultivating Change, because even as we bring up Breonna Taylor, it's like constantly Black women forgotten about. Where you have to be tough. Where it's like, no, I don't need to. I'm gonna be strong. Where this like independent woman, like it's a bad thing. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a survival mode, as if this independent woman thing is like, oh, they don't want anybody. They just want to do things themselves, or that's survival mode, right? And so we oftentimes aren't vulnerable. And I'll say I have the multiple identities of also being a collegiate athlete. I'm a military kid, but turning to that to even be like, I'm straight. I'm okay. I'm fine. And that's why I said I was that one that didn't go to therapy. Like, I'll be all right. I'm fine. Like, as like I can handle it. I can handle it. I can handle everything. And it's like, no, I don't have to handle everything. That was survival mode. And it took me to go talking to somebody and later becoming a therapist to say, I don't have to be strong all the time. I don't have to carry 10,000 things. I don't have to do everything perfectly. Because we also feel like we have to carry all Black women to say like, I got to do everything because I don't want to fit the stereotype or these microaggressions. Or if I then have an attitude or show that I'm upset about something, let me not show that. So I have to hold it in. And then it's like, who do we go to then to confide in and say like, I can't let this out, right? Especially single mother. I'll say I'm a single mother too. Ashley can speak to that.
Same, I am as well, yeah.
There's so much to that. And I'll pass it to Ashley so she can speak on it.
Well, we all shared books. So I was going to share a book that I sent out to my group of friends. It's a self-love workbook for women. And it's kind of like a guided thing like yours, Carlton, where you can go in and just read. But it also makes you take a deep dive into like childhood stuff too. And we didn't really touch on this, but if we have a little bit more time, I would like for Brittany to kind of touch on the childhood thing if she doesn't mind.
Okay.
But yes.
ACEs, you want me to touch on?
Yeah, ACEs, yeah. So a lot of our whole mental health stems from childhood experiences that we've had too. So just being able to look back, and a lot of times we get to the point where we kind of block it out or blank it out, and then we'll lash out and then be like, oh, I forgot about that. Because it was our brain's way of like coping with what happened. We like kind of block it out until we get triggered. So this is a good book to kind of do some like self-reflection, and so you can like be aware of your triggers and work through them and that sort of thing as well. So, and
can you put the title of that book?
Yes,
I want to let everybody know this is shameless plug for JeRod. I have a book club, and I'm just gonna have to have a book club. we're
Cool.
gonna have to do this. So I'll put that out. But I'm glad you mentioned. You said what, Mo?
Should have been saying something about that.
I'm glad you mentioned ACEs. I know Mo is really huge on ACEs, but before you touch on it and before you close us out, Mo, Brittany, I know Ashley wanted you to speak on that. So if you don't mind just staying over time for us for a little bit and speaking on that.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, like now, if you don't mind touching on ACEs.
Covered by her
I was
phone.
sorry. I was
As
like, something started playing, and then that's where okay. So no, ACEs is about childhood trauma, and there's like an ACE score. So there's a test that you could take, and more children, I think they're more applying it to like mental health and having children take it, even some of our like going into college settings and taking it. So before 18, it's like this score that determines whether you had traumatic environment, whether it's like you had a parent that was incarcerated, maybe you saw somebody abused in your household, your score goes up. If you had somebody struggling with substance abuse, if your parents constantly threaten to get divorced or say like, I'm leaving, but then stay. So, right, like, so those are some of the, go ahead, Maurice. Oh,
He said you're hitting home.
Yeah, physical abuse.
Yes. So those are like just some of the common questions of the checklist. And the higher your ACE score, the more it determines like your stressors or you're more susceptible to have a mental disorder or mental illness. And let me just say, there's so much stigma to mental illness. It could be mild, moderate, severe. You can still experience symptoms of a mental illness. That doesn't mean you have a full-blown diagnosis. Okay, so this is just kind of a foundation to let you know, to say, hey, this is where we can work on some things and give you some tools due to you modeling these symptoms. That doesn't mean you have a full-blown diagnosis, but ACEs is another way to assess that. That's why I say that. It just helps you assess if you're more susceptible.
Perfect. And Brittany, I want to add that not only mental health, but also affects physical health.
Yeah.
Higher ACE scores have higher rates of diabetes, high rates of heart disease, high rates of anything physical. So it literally, stress can literally kill you physically. I mean,
yeah, silent killing.
And adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, is one of those scores that can kind of help determine your likelihood of you having those kind of things. So I just wanted to add that in there as well.
Thank you.
My pleasure. And
that's what I was trying to.
Yeah, no, we so I appreciate everyone's time. Let me just say we've had a lot of guests. And this is probably one of the most fruitful conversations that I've been a part of, not just with the discussion, but in general, right? So I really want to say I appreciate you all coming on this platform, expressing what mental health is, the importance of mental health, and just allowing us to kind of pick your brains about some actionable steps that people can do to protect their mental health. Everyone has been great. February 22nd, go on their Facebook page, find the Google Meet. I'm going to join, probably be 1 o'clock because I ate a little early for me, but definitely thank you so much. And really, let me say this last piece. I'm extremely happy that you all are reaching out and doing the work for these kids. Nothing makes me happier than to know that we still have Black people reaching back and doing the work for the children. So thank you so much for that. And with that being said, I'm gonna kick it back to my co-host, the man, Maurice. Maurice, thank you too for making this happen, man.
Hey, y'all, I apologize because I'm in the airport. I had to go get my bag. So it was like, I finally got my bag. So I'm in the airport. I'm going to leave here in a little bit. But I want to thank you all for joining us on the discussion. And I want to give a book plug too. This book right here has really, really empowered me. It's really think about where we come from. Post-traumatic slave syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGroy. That book right there. If you haven't read this, you need to. You need to. I'm telling you, it will open your mind up and to understand ourselves as Black folks. So I would highly advise you to get this book. But with that, I want to thank JeRod, my co-host. Thank you, Carlton, Brittany, Ashley, and Mr. Danny Fresh. I want to thank you all for coming to us. We definitely want to have you all on again. I'm interested to learn how this event jumps off, and I think it's going to be huge, targeting our 7th and 8th graders in our CPS schools. So thank you all for that. Thank you for everything that you do. I'm watching you all. Very inspiring. And to all of our guests who've joined us, who are watching or joined us on the Zoom, thank you all for joining us. And this is the discussion. We got another treat for you. Got more information coming soon. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Great week, you all.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.